Welcome to the Geekly. My name is Jules.
I'm Lex. Today we are talking about kind of a double bill, the 1999 space opera spoof comedy drama thing, Galaxy Quest, and then the documentary on the same film called Never Surrender. So obviously we're going to start off with talking about Galaxy Quest, which I originally saw in the theaters. I don't know when the first time you saw it.
I think it might also have been at the cinema. I was trying to remember, but I think I saw it right back when it first came out. Yeah.
And like the interesting thing about it is like, okay, I saw the cast and Tim Allen in the lead role. I was kind of like, oh god. And the way they marketed it, and they talked about this in the trailer as well. I thought, oh no, this is just going to be like really dumb and ridiculous, and I have no interest in seeing this. But I think like a friend of mine was like, oh yeah, let's go check this out. And like, well, it does have Sigourney Weaver and Alan Rickman, who I'd seen in Dogma at that point. I think I'm pretty sure Dogma came out before. And anyway, Sigourney Weaver is enough to kind of be like, yeah, I'll go check it out. And I ended up loving it. Like, I mean, it's kind of brilliant, and they really, really sold it short in terms of the marketing. Because like it is a comedy, but it's not a dumb comedy. It really is kind of like an homage to all of the like early sci-fi shows like Star Trek and Lost in Space and stuff like that, where it's a little bit campy, but it's also they're telling really kind of important, deep stories at the same time.
Yeah, I was talking to Ross from I Understood That Reference podcast a few weeks ago. We talked about certain films where you look at it on paper, and you look at the plot, you look at the cast, you look maybe at the director, and you think to yourself, this could be awful. Like, this film has no right to be good. This was one of those where you looked at all the individual parts and you thought, I don't quite know how they're going to fit together. But it was just a bit of a lightning in a bottle situation. And yet they talked in the documentary, I don't want to talk about too much about documentary, but they talked about, other directors, they talked about other leading actors that would have been in the Tim Allen role. And you just wonder how that would have impacted it. And whether or not that would have meant at the time at a much higher box office, but a lot less kind of fan appreciation. All the planets aligned, and it just happened to be really, really good and really compelling. And as I watched this, and then I immediately watched the documentary, and I finished it, and I thought to myself, I haven't really watched this film with like an analytical eye before. I thought to myself, this is kind of a perfect film, isn't it? Like there is nothing I can actually think of that needs to be removed or changed. And then 10 seconds into the documentary, they talk about how David Mamet said there are 4 perfect films, and one of them was Galaxy Quest. And I was like, every observation I've had watching this film is going to seem like I ripped it from the documentary now, because they focused on things I was planning on focusing on. But I think he's right. I think this is a perfect film. And like you said, it's just a love letter to this group of kind of sci-fi films like your Star Treks, but also to the broader fandom and to the fans. And it's basically whispering. It's never, that overt, but it's just whispering that without you, we are nothing, and we appreciate you. And I think that's potentially why it stood the test of time, because it is very respectful of the fandoms. It's a partnership. That's what it's emphasizing, and that's what I think I liked most about this film.
Yeah, I mean, just to kind of elaborate on that a little bit, I think one of the really important aspects of Galaxy Quest is that it's made by fans. The director, the writer, they're all massive geeks who love science fiction, love the possibility of science fiction, grew up, watching the original series. And, like the director at one point said, even now I can watch the original series of Star Trek and appreciate how campy and ridiculous it is, but also be totally absorbed in the story. And Sigourney Weaver was like basically like harassed her way into the part because she was just like, I really want to do this. Tim Allen was the same. So you had this kind of passion from the people participating in it, and I think that really shows in how the characters are portrayed, how they all came together, the overall aesthetic and atmosphere of the film. The people who worked on it really, really cared about what they were doing, and that always comes across in the final product.
It was interesting that this is one of the kind of earliest DreamWorks films, and they really, really didn't pull their punches in terms of spending on VFX. And I don't know about you, but when I watch this film, I just think the VFX hasn't aged a day.
I mean, you think like this is a 20-year-old film. Not all 20-year-old films have aged as well. I mean, shit, even some 5-year-old films haven't aged that well in terms of the effects. But they did. They went with like the top of the industry for this, which was kind of amazing because when like you said, when you look at it on paper, it's one of those things that, you know, you kind of look at and see, I don't know how this is going to work. And, you know, particularly in the lead up, there was a lot of shifting around of parts and a lot of things happened that could have killed the project entirely. And yet, you know, DreamWorks did invest this huge amount of money in pulling this project off, which was kind of like a revolutionary idea at the time. Like, this was before the geeks inherited the Earth, and this was kind of one of the first films that portrayed geeks as relevant, important people with something to contribute and not just the butt of a joke.
What are some of your favourite moments from the film?
I love the moment where Tim Allen is on the like recorder with Justin Long and is like, "Wait, it's all real." And Justin Long is like, "I knew it." I love Justin Long's character and his little coterie of nerds with their specs and data sheets and everything, kind of being the early version of the man in the chair, the geeks in the chair. I think the aliens are really well done. Particularly like the relationship between Alan Rickman and the alien that sort of is his protege, who has this kind of like wide-eyed adoration towards him, and then, you know, you get to the moment where he's dying and Alan Rickman's character realizes that while he has minimized the importance of the role because it's not kind of stereotypically great or meaningful acting, that's kind of something he deals with through the whole thing. You know, he was a Shakespearean stage actor, and now he's playing this weird alien creature on a TV show. He realizes the importance of the role that he played. Like, I don't even mind the romantic link between Sigourney Weaver and Tim Allen at the end because it really doesn't feel forced. Like, even from the very beginning, you kind of get that, like, maybe when they were on set, they had kind of a thing and they're, like, former lovers, but something happened. Well, obviously, like, Tim Allen's character is kind of an ass at this point, so you can see why she doesn't want anything to do with him. But then he kind of goes through an evolution and becomes a better human being. I think they all become better human beings by the end of it. And so, like, them kind of having a romantic moment doesn't seem that out of place, where a lot of times, like, it annoys me because it seems forced. But, I don't know, what are some of your favorite moments?
The moment where his would-be son died in Alan Rickman's arms, I thought was very powerful, and that when Alan Rickman actually delivered that line as well, like, it was just one of the most. It's an incredibly somber moment, and what is ultimately, you know, as you said, quite a campy film. But there were these moments throughout, you know, the bit where he told Mathazar on the torture bed, "We're actors," and the kind of the heartbreak. But the bit I think I liked most was when they were effectively an away team on this planet trying to get this, is it like a beryllium sphere or something? I liked how they really leaned into the kind of Kirk era in that, because obviously you think about Kirk and you think about Nesmith, and I think Nesmith is meant to be like a Kirk proxy. You know, when he lost his shirt and when he was kind of rolling on the floor and stuff like that, and when he was fighting against the rock monster. But I think it's possible, like, it's difficult to pick a favourite character, but I think the character of Sam Rockwell's Guy actually appealed to me quite a lot. When they land and Tony Shalhoub's character opens the door, and Sam Rockwell's like, "Is there air? You don't know that there's not air. Like, what are you doing?" And his constant fear that he was like the red shirt that was going to die as like a recurring joke, I really liked that as well. So his whole series of panic attacks when they were on that planet, coming up against those cute little aliens, I really enjoyed. I also like the fact that when they would be in certain situations, characters would say, "Guys, we've got to get out of here quickly because Guy might die." They were constantly worried about like the fact that this, it was almost like this preordained thing was going to happen. So they were kind of a bit protective of Guy. I liked that.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say that Guy is probably my favorite character, and because, like, Sam Rockwell played it so well. Like, it could have easily been over the top and really superficial, but, like, you really identified with the character and kind of, I don't know, like, I sort of imagined that he was the only sensible one on the team. And, I mean, he was kind of their wrangler at the convention, and that role never seemed to kind of stop. So even while Nesmith was, like, the captain, guys seemed to be the ones that was kind of keeping things in line. Like when they were on the planet and Sigourney Weaver was going, it was like, oh, how cute. And she was going to go out and say hi to them. And guy like grabbed her and was like, have you guys never even watched the show? Like they're going to be horrible. And he kept saying things like that. And like every time they said like, okay, we have to fix this now or Guy is going to die. Like I cracked up because, as you said, it was this recurring joke about the red shirt, particularly because in the episode that he was in, he was the red shirt. Yeah, it was just really really funny, and I think the different styles of acting, the different personalities of the characters, the different personalities of the actors, all managed to kind of come together and really create a very strong ensemble. And I mean, this is probably the only thing I've watched that Tim Allen is in that I actually liked. I really did not have a good opinion of him, but I think he really showed his acting capabilities in this film, and I think in a lot of ways it also stretched his acting abilities and made him do things that other projects haven't demanded of him. Like you mentioned, the torture scene and the kind of surrogate son with Alan Rickman's character, they did lean into the dramatic moments. They didn't kind of try to put a comedic spin on them. They didn't superficially brush over them. Like both of those moments were really intense, really emotional, and the director was committed to them being moments of drama and not comedy, and I really appreciated that, and I feel like it gave the film more depth.
Do you think that a similar show could be made about Star Wars? Because I've always felt that Star Trek takes itself not as seriously as Star Wars, and I think that helps make it kind of ripe for pastiche and parody. I don't know if something similar could happen with Star Wars. What do you think about that?
I agree with you. I was actually going to say a similar thing. Star Trek has never taken itself seriously. Some of the series have more than others, but particularly if you look at like the origin of it, the original series is kind of tongue in cheek. It's not very, it's serious in a certain way, but they're also kind of flippant, and they have their little jokes. And Next Generation is very similar, as is Deep Space Nine. Voyager and Enterprise get a little more serious, and I don't think they work as well for exactly that reason. With Star Wars, I think if they tried to make a film like this, it would just be a campy spoof. Because Star Wars is so serious. It's so serious. And it doesn't poke fun at itself at all. I mean, the actors poke fun at it quite a bit, and they seem to have like a certain amount of humor. But yeah, I can't see a film like Galaxy Quest being made about Star Wars and actually succeeding. I also think that like the fan base of Star Wars would lose their fucking shit.
Let's pretend that Star Trek had made a film in exactly this vein, and the core cast were, the Next Generation. How do you think that would have gone down?
I think it would have been amazing. Like I would watch it. I would buy it. I would know it line for line. I think it would be the most amazing thing, and I think the Star Trek fans would just embrace it. Mainstream culture, maybe not so much, but I think Star Trek fans have a very different approach to the Star Trek franchise than Star Wars fans have towards Star Wars, and part of it is the tone of the franchise, which is kind of, as we mentioned, a bit tongue-in-cheek, doesn't take itself totally seriously. So the fans kind of respond like that, and I think having this kind of meta movie with the Next Generation cast playing themselves, playing the characters, it would have been amazing, and people would have loved it.
I also think that they could, if they wanted to, they've got this really deep bench, and obviously the Picard crew would be there, but there could just be this amazing moment where William Shatner kind of walked in at like the final moment or something, or whether some of the other captains could have come in. They've got so many options, and I just think it would have been an absolute sensation. And yeah, Brent Spiner, he said, why did we never do this? Yeah, it would have been amazing.
As a thing in itself, I enjoyed the documentary, but I could have lived without it. I feel like about an hour in, it sort of waffled a bit, and there were about 20 minutes of everybody kind of going on about how wonderful everybody was. I know it's a thing, but even in the situations where it is true, it feels disingenuous because everybody who's asked about the people they work with in Hollywood is always like, oh yeah, that director is the best director I've ever worked with. They understand people, they understand their actors like no other director. The rest of the cast was really great. We were just like a family, and blah blah blah. And it's like, okay, great. But particularly because the whole beginning of the documentary was about all of the problems it had, and the fact that like none of the main cast were even like first or second choices of the original casting people, and had to kind of push their way in. Like, I mean, Tim Allen was in talks with the original director, and they literally said no to him, and wanted all of these like action heroes instead. And then, losing their director, which was kind of a big win, and going with this at the time kind of nobody to direct this film. Obviously, it had a lot of issues. There were, they kept referencing stressful days and using these kind of coded language to make it not be like, oh, this was a horrible taxing experience. I don't know if it was a horrible taxing experience, but I did feel like after about an hour it started waffling and just kind of became a mutual jerk off session. And then it kind of got the ending at the end. It sort of came back around to the whole point of the film, which was, the fans are the heart and soul of the science fiction community, and all of these movies, all of these films, the conventions, everything, none of it would exist without the dedication of the fans. And it's a very kind of unique sort of culture around the science fiction narratives. But like overall, I found it quite interesting to get kind of a behind the scenes look at it, and to hear from other well established science fiction actors, directors, figureheads about their interpretation of Galaxy Quest, why they like it. I loved Brent Spiner's impression of Patrick Stewart. It was like so spot on. It made me laugh. It was that was probably my favorite part of the documentary.
Yeah, I think as a like I'm not really a huge Galaxy Quest diehard or anything, so I could also have kind of lived without the documentary. As a piece of art in itself, I found it incredibly insightful, actually, and I really appreciated the very quick edit between jumping from one section to the next. I actually found Will Wheaton to be incredibly insightful himself, and he strikes me as the kind of guy that is a real historian of both sci-fi, also film and television. And I was kind of captivated every time he was on the screen. It's very interesting that this was made by Screen Junkies in collaboration with fandom, because it may be telling us that sci-fi is now at the level where it's actually really being taken seriously, to the point where documentaries are being made about certain shows. Because if it continues, there are so many shows and films from like this particular genre that I would love to be made into documentaries. So I hope this is the start of a whole series of documentaries. If Screen Junkies are actually kind of branching out into different kinds of projects, I'd be very interested to see what they come up with next. Everything within this, whether it was the people that are actually involved in film and TV, whether it was the people doing the cosplay, they were all testament to the fact that if you treat fans with respect, your project will last the test of time. Because as you say, it's been 20 years. People have deemed it worthy of the documentary treatment, and it was an hour and a half, and the film's only an hour and 42 minutes, and it was a very considerable block of entertainment. And it just says, if you take your fans seriously, they will, remember you, and they will invest in you, and they will keep talking about you, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years down the line. And that was the real underlying message of the whole documentary. And yeah, I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, like it was nice seeing the various actors talk about their experience on the film, and you could tell that even now, 20 years later, they have a deep affection for the film in itself and their experiences on the film. I know a lot of people are like, oh yeah, of course I don't regret doing this, and whatever, but like particularly when Tim Allen and Sigourney Weaver were talking about their experiences, it was very obvious that they really did legitimately enjoy this particular project, and that it does have a soft spot in their hearts for them. Also, like when all of the cast and crew were talking about their experiences with Alan Rickman, I mean, like I legitimately got choked up about that. It reminded me when the crew of The Crow was talking about Brandon Lee and his death, and how like even so many years later they were all still deeply emotionally affected by that. Obviously the circumstances are a bit different. Alan Rickman didn't get killed in front of them all, but you know he had a big impact on the cast and the crew, and I loved hearing all of the little kind of snarky lines that he said to people, like you know when the one of the producers thanked him for coming and he said, "This has been fun intermittently." Like
Yeah, when he was talking to the actor that played Quellek, and he said, "I've been removed from a piece because of my illness. I've been replaced by Bill Nye." The fact that he said he was so like resentful in his tone.
Alan Rickman gets look because he's done so much serious film. I mean, he's you know, there's obviously the Harry Potter films, but he even in the Harry Potter films, he plays kind of like this very serious, glowering role. He is funny as shit, or I guess he was funny as shit, but he has very underappreciated sort of humor because it is that kind of dry, sarcastic wit that he says with a straight face and a serious tone. And you're not entirely sure if he's joking, but at the same time, it is quite the things he says are quite funny. It was enjoyable. It was informative. As you said, like Will Wheaton knows an impressive amount of trivia and lore and technique about sci-fi film and television, and just film and television in general. Of course, like that's his whole career basically. He does a lot of like YouTube videos and commentary, and I think he's got a podcast now, and you know, I mean, he discusses this stuff all the time. But yeah, it was really great to like hear from him. It was great to see like Brent Spiner talk about it. It was also great to like see Star Trek people view Galaxy Quest as like a love letter to them rather than a criticism or a mocking of them. Like the fact that they all kind of loved Galaxy Quest as much as we do just kind of, I think, epitomizes the atmosphere and tone of the Star Trek franchise.
Lex enjoyed it intermittently. I quite like the nuts and bolts in a documentary, so I think I liked it a little bit more. But both, you know, if you appreciate one, you'll appreciate the other, I think. So, yeah, and I'm a big fan of a love letter. You know, this actually made me think of The Orville a lot.
Yes, I had the same thought.
Yeah, The Orville stands on its own 2 feet very well, in my opinion. But, you know, it's you do wonder, did The Orville, is it based on Galaxy Quest? You know, it's that kind of humour, and I love any show that's out and out a real love letter to something else. Do you think that there'll be, you know, they've talked about this Amazon Prime Galaxy Quest TV show. Do you think that will materialise?
I don't think so because they were in talks to do it. Like they decided to do it when Alan Rickman was still alive, and his death sort of derailed it. And you know, everyone involved basically said some version of this won't work without him. I mean, it's always difficult having a sequel or a TV spinoff when not all of the original cast is involved, especially if it's, you know, I think there's some ways you can get around it. I think like Limitless did it where Bradley Cooper was in the first few episodes and kind of acted like a mentor, sort of literally passing the baton to the new guy. Or you know, like the way Robert Downey Jr. was in the Spider-Man films, just kind of like these brief little appearances. But I think particularly when the original actor is dead or just wants nothing to do with the franchise, there is always this sense of absence. Or like, you know, when a death happens off screen, the audience picks up on that, and the dynamics are never quite the same. So at this point, I don't think. I mean, as much as I love Galaxy Quest, I don't want it to be ruined by somebody else, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I kind of want to just leave it in its pure form and let us appreciate what we have and not mess with it too much.
Like you, I just don't know how you get around his absence. I'm on the same side as you, particularly because when things achieve cult status, that is something you cannot buy. And to diminish that would be a real crime, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I mean, as a writer, people always ask me like what my aspirations are in terms of being published and in terms of, you know, being successful. Like, oh, do you want to be on the bestseller list? Do you want this? Do you want that? Do you want to like have endless amounts of money? And my answer is always, I want cult status more than being on the bestseller list. More than anything, like I just want cult status. I want a group of fans who are that dedicated and that involved. And I would be happy with that. I don't care if like I always have to have a day job, but if I have cult status, then I will feel like I accomplished something. So yeah, like as you said, you can't buy cult status, and it's a very unique phenomenon. It creates a certain relationship between the creators and the fans that just it can't be replicated by box office hits or anything like that. It just it's a much more symbiotic relationship, I think, than kind of the huge franchises that make their way into mainstream media.
Thanks very much for listening. We will be back same time next week.
And if you want to get in on the patron game, you can get access to all of our bonus content for $1 a month, plus some cool other things. So check it out. Bye.
Bye.